I now call the February 23rd, 2021 meeting, City of High Point Planning and Zoning Commission to order. My name is Tom Kirkman. I am Chair of the Commission. I will now ask the recording secretary to conduct a roll call vote of the commissioners that are. I now call the February 23rd, 2021 meeting, City of High Point Planning and Zoning Commission to order. My name is Tom Kirkman. I am Chair of the Commission. I will now ask the recording secretary to conduct a roll call vote of the commissioners that are. I now call the February 23rd, 2021 meeting. I believe this happened at the
Couple months ago.
They'll get it straight.
Yeah, did you hear your voice on there?
Commissioners, when I say your name, please answer present. Mr. Ushak?
Present.
Mr. Kirkman?
Present.
Ms. McGill? Present. Mr. Moore?
Present.
Mr. Morgan?
Present.
Ms. Swift? Mr. Venable?
Present.
Mr. Walsh?
Present.
Mr. Wheatley?
Present.
Mr. Chairman, you have 8 members present.
8. Very well, we have a quorum. Also want to acknowledge that staff from Planning and Development Department, City Transportation Department, and the City Attorney's Office are in attendance this evening to provide technical and professional assistance to the Commission. Before we move into tonight's agenda, we will now consider the minutes from our January 26, 2021 meeting. Any of the commissioners noticed any questions or corrections to the minutes as they've been presented? If not, I'll ask for a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Mr. Walsh has moved to approve the minutes as presented. Do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Morgan has seconded those minutes. I'll ask the recording secretary to conduct a roll call vote.
Commissioners, please say yes or no when I call your name. Mr. Ushak?
Yes.
Mr. Kirkman?
Yes.
Ms. McGill?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Mr. Venable?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
And Mr. Wheatley?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, you have approved by a vote of 8-0.
Very well. The minutes have been approved as presented. Before we begin our public hearing this evening, on behalf of the commission, I would like to welcome everyone. The commission is charged with reviewing and making recommendations to the city council on a variety of development applications and on plans and policies for the city. Our review includes conducting a public hearing to obtain additional information and comment that could be important in evaluating the item. Let me stop right there. Commissioner Swift has come in. Do we need to make a notation that we'll have 9 members here?
Yes, we will.
Very well. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the resulting state restrictions on public gatherings, the commission is meeting remotely in accordance with North Carolina state law. This has necessitated some changes to our normal meeting procedure, which I will take a minute to explain. There are 9 commissioners present at City Hall this evening. Items on the agenda will be heard as normal with a member of city staff presenting a summary of the application. That will be followed by the staff's recommendation. The applicant and those assisting the applicant, all who are attending this meeting remotely this evening, will then be given an opportunity to present information in support of the item. The Planning and Development staff published and sent notices that solicited the public to provide comments on these items by email, phone, or letter. The period for public comment on these items will extend for an additional 24 hours beyond the conclusion of tonight's hearings. For that reason, the commission will not be voting on any hearing item on tonight's agenda. Instead, this meeting will be recessed to Thursday, February 25th at 6:00 p.m. This allows the commission to further discuss any additional information or comments submitted by the public before making an official recommendation to the city council. And on that note, before we move to the agenda, I want to mention to members of the public that may be listening this evening that you have 3 ways to submit your comments or questions to the city: by email to build@highpointnc.gov. You may call 336-883-3522 and leave a message, or you can drop off written comments in High Point's utility drop boxes that are located on both sides of the municipal building, downtown High Point, 211 South Hamilton Street, one on Green Drive, one on Commerce Avenue parking lots. Please be sure to also include the case number so it can be applied to the correct case. All comments must be received by the end of the day tomorrow, which is Wednesday, February 24th. With that, we'll move to the first item on tonight's agenda. Zoning Amendment 21-01. Mr. Shannon.
Excuse me just a second.
Yes, sir.
We don't have a picture here.
We may when we get started.
Yeah, there it is. I have what you have.
I think we've all got the same thing.
It just came on.
Should we be seeing more than what we've got on our screen?
I believe they should be controlling that from the back. If you can check with our IT person in the back.
I mean, I can look at yours. It's not a big deal.
Well, you don't have anything.
No, we're black, he and I.
We got a desktop. There we go.
Here we go.
Okay.
But you don't have anything?
Oh, it's okay. I can look at it.
Or anything on your monitors?
We don't have anything on ours at all.
Okay.
We do. We do, they don't.
Y'all left us in the dark.
With one monitor's down.
It was on.
You want me to work on this one, Lee? We can look. I mean, not how we can.
Perhaps we could start and you can double up and then they can work on that while we're underway. Mr. Shannon.
Okay. Herb Shannon, Senior Planner, the City of High Point Planning and Development Department. Just pause for one moment while our IT person comes up to correct the monitor. I think it's
Yeah.
up there. Yeah, what's the laptop for? That should be up there too. Have it in the back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So all members of the commission have their monitors working?
Appears so, yes.
Okay. Herb Shannon, Senior Planner at the City of High Point Planning and Development Department. And I will be providing you with a summary for my first public hearing item, zoning map amendment ZA-21-01. This is a request to rezone a 20.8 acre parcel located along the Eastchester Gateway Corridor from its current zoning, which is conditional use office institutional, to a conditional zoning office institutional district. This property is located along the east side of Eastchester Drive, approximately 1,300 feet south of Deep River Road. This first slide is just a general overall location map of the city. The site is highlighted in red, and this is a blow up of that site in question. The OI district accommodates a wide variety of office institutional uses, including healthcare, social service, personal service, and it also allows some retail uses with size limitations. The OI district also allows a wide variety of residential uses at a maximum density of 16 units per acre. This current site obtained its current conditional use office institutional district zoning in 1998. At that time, there was a proposal for this 20-acre site to be developed as a business office park. That full development of this land did not come to fruition. The applicant is requesting rezoning to a updated or a new conditional zoning office institutional district to update the zoning conditions to allow residential uses as a development option. That 1998 zoning approval that established the current zoning, it specifically prohibited residential uses. All the other uses of that district are allowed, and the applicant is requesting this new CZOI district to allow residential as a development option for the site. A conditional zoning ordinance was submitted by the applicant as part of this application, and that includes conditions pertaining to building height, a conditional zoning plan, landscaping, and access requirements. This is a copy of the land use map for this portion of the city. This segment of the Eastchester corridor has an office land use designation. This classification includes professional, personal, and business service uses. For those members of the public, the area that is highlighted in blue has a land use designation of office. Those other areas that are kind of behind the blue are in the yellow has a designation of low density residential, and the green is recreation and open space. Since the late 1980s, this segment of the Eastchester Gateway Corridor between Lasher Drive and Hickswood Drive, there have been multiple parcels rezoned to allow office institutional district. And this is just a blow up of the zoning along of this area. And you can see along the Eastchester corridor, there are multiple parcels in this area that have either a conditional zoning OI or a conditional use OI zoning. I would note as part of the staff report, there's an analysis from the Transportation Department. A traffic impact analysis was prepared by the applicant's traffic engineer. A summary of that report, or the executive summary, is included in the back of materials in the back of your staff report. This study based traffic impact on a proposal for approximately 9,000 square feet of non-residential uses, OI district uses, and approximately 264 multifamily uses. Such a development is anticipated to generate over 1,500 trips in a 24-hour period, with 68 a.m. peak hour trips and approximately 106 p.m. peak hour trips. This study was reviewed by the City of High Point Transportation Department. They have recommended, and the applicant has agreed and included in their conditional zoning ordinance a condition for the regarding vehicle access, that there be a maximum of 2 points of access to Eastchester Drive. I would note that one of those access points is already established. As you look at the map, the southern portion of the site, you see there's an existing access drive that would count as one of the access points, and the other access point would be along the northern property line of the zoning site. Also, the applicants included a conditional zoning plan. This is that plan that is part of their conditional zoning ordinance, in which they divide the site into two tracks, track A and track B. That track A is along the Eastchester frontage, about 240 feet in width. They have offered a condition that uses within that track A portion will just be for OI district uses, but residential uses will be prohibited in track A. Track B will allow any of the uses of the OI district use. So it could be those various office or non-residential uses, or it could be residential use. The Planning and Development Department offers the following comments as you consider this request. First, compatibility with surrounding area. Standards of the development ordinance already have requirements pertaining to perimeter landscaping, parking lot landscaping, exterior lighting, and open space for any type of multifamily or townhome development. As to building height, the applicant has offered a condition along the southern boundary of the property adjacent to the Foxwood Meadow subdivision, and that's that residential development that lies to the south. They've offered a condition to restrict building height. Within that adjacent residential subdivision, maximum building height is 50 feet. The applicants offered a condition that within any development within 75 feet of the perimeter of the southern boundary of the site is restricted to 50 feet in height, so as to have the same building height as allowed in the adjacent single-family development. That 75 feet is about the approximate setback of that abutting office building. If you had a chance to travel along this segment of Eastchester Drive, you'll see just south of track A, there's an existing multi-story office building. I believe that's about 4 or 5 stories. And that 75 feet is the approximate setback to that building. So that is a condition from the applicant. Compatibility would also be an issue that the applicants have to work with the topography and existing physical constraints of the site. This is a topography map of the site. For those members of the public who are not accustomed to reading such maps, it shows the kind of layout of the land, and also notes environmental constraints for our streams. Where those lines are further apart, that means the land is fairly level or moderately sloping. Where those lines are close together, it shows a steeper terrain. You can see kind of to the right along the eastern third of the site, there's a perennial stream that runs in a north-south direction through the site. The development ordinance would require stream buffers along both sides of that stream. Depending on the intensity of development, that stream buffer will range between 50 feet and 100 feet along both sides of the stream. That leaves not much room along the area to the east of the site for any type of development. That stream meanders along that portion of the site, and it's about 160 to 295 feet from the eastern boundary of the zoning site. So if there were any development on that eastern part of the site across a stream, once those stream buffers are in place, it does not leave a lot of room for intense development east of the stream. So that will also assist in ensuring compatibility to the residential subdivision to the east. Also, I want to bring up an aerial of the site. Another issue that is important, and I'm noting this based upon several phone calls the staff has received, access would be configured toward Eastchester Drive. There are no stub streets to this property. So staff has received several phone calls. Will they be taking access through my neighborhood? Will they be building a road through my neighborhood? There are no existing streets that stub to this site. The two proposed access points to the site will be oriented toward the Eastchester corridor. There have been a lot of questions regarding environmental impacts, and this site is located within the City Lake General Watershed area. Any development of the site, regardless of what type of development, it will be subject to the City Lake General Watershed requirements. To reduce soil erosion and minimize excess stormwater runoff, the development ordinance will require a primary stormwater control measures be installed for any development with a total impervious area greater than 24% of the site. And as I previously noted, wherever there is a classified perennial stream or intermittent stream, development ordinance has requirements for stream buffers that must be met. Another item to note that the applicant has offered conditions for higher landscaping standards along the southern boundary of the site. The ordinance notes that where you have multifamily as a single family, a type C planting yard is required. That planting yard has an average width of 15 feet and consists of 7 trees and 20 shrubs every 100 linear feet. To ensure development will not adversely affect adjacent lands, the applicant has offered a condition that any undisturbed area along the southern boundary of the site next to those existing residentially zoned areas, that any development within 45 feet of the southern boundary, that area is to be replenished with a double row of evergreen trees, along with installation of a 6-foot high opaque fence. And to ensure long-term mitigation, when they're saying double row, you're gonna have a row of evergreens, and they've noted in their condition that those trees will be set apart 10 feet on center approximately. And then that second row will be offset by 5 feet to form to assist with that screening of any development. And when you look at that double row, 10 feet on center for both rows, that's approximately 20 trees every 100 linear feet. And they've included in their condition that the evergreen trees must be of a species that can reach a height of 25 feet at maturity. Finally, as part of our evaluation, staff looked at the development pattern. This section of the Eastchester corridor, as I previously noted, has had multiple sites that have been zoned for office uses. For larger parcels such as this, past zoning actions have supported office zoning along the frontage of the site and residential uses beyond that frontage. And this development is meeting that, and that has been a development pattern that's been encouraged along this section of the corridor. In conclusion, staff is recommending approval of the request to rezone this 20.8 acre parcel to a conditional zoning office institutional district. As conditioned, the request will be compatible with the surrounding area and in conformance with adopted plans. We have included in your staff report a consistency statement that the request is consistent with adopted policy guidance because the requested conditional zoning OI district is supported by relevant goals and objectives of the land use plan and the Eastchester Quarter Plan as referred to in this, as referenced in the staff report. The request is also reasonable in the public interest because the requested conditional zoning office's institutional district will enable a development pattern that is consistent with the existing land use pattern established along this segment of the Eastchester Drive, which is office along with the street frontage and residential uses along the remaining area of the site. With any type of conditional zoning request, the Planning and Zoning Commission must include a statement in their final decision. I would note there was a error in the staff report on pages 4 and 6. Just a paragraph was removed, and we have those updated pages by the dies for you. And I believe one comment has been submitted, and that is also available for you also. That is a brief summary. Are there any questions of staff at this time?
Any questions for Mr. Shannon? Chair recognizes Mr. Uszak.
Mr. Shannon, I'm looking at page 18, the map on that page.
That was page 18?
Yes, I'm not, it's sort of like this one, but
Yes.
one is up. So you talked about compatibility with surrounding zoning.
I believe you're referring to this map here.
Yes.
Yes.
You discussed compatibility with surrounding zoning. And as I look at this particular map, I don't see any multifamily units anywhere on this map. And yet we're talking about putting a multifamily units into this tract B, 264 units, which looks like it's as many units as are on this map in single family. I mean, it seems like this is not compatible with surrounding area.
I'm going to go to this next map here. Shows the zoning. I would note along the opposite side of this segment of the Eastchester Quarter, there is a similar zoning pattern that's been established where you have a RM5 residential multifamily 5 that is a townhouse development where you have office type zoning in front of it in the multifamily to the rear. I would note there are few parcels in this segment of the quarter that are this large. So it's not a situation that you see a lot along this segment of the quarter, but where there have been larger parcels, and I would specifically note across the street, is a similar pattern.
You're saying that a few townhouses is similar to 264 apartment units?
What staff's position would be is that the OI district permits residential use, whether it's single family, whether it's townhome, whether it's multifamily. Along this segment of the Eastchester Quarter, the policies encourage situations if you have a large enough piece of property to have office along the front and residential, be it single family, townhome, or multifamily to the rear.
Is there a shortage of apartments in this area?
I do not have that information, sir.
Anything else for Mr. Shannon? Very well, thank you, sir. Is the applicant present?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tom Carroll. I'm an attorney with the law firm Fox Rothschild. My address is 529 West Parkway in High Point. With me here tonight are Kai Bunker, who is the development manager for Leo Terra Development, and also Rich Glover with Jamestown Engineering. I don't want to repeat everything that Herb said, but I think I can add some color commentary to elements of this application. If you would go to the first slide, please. I think it's important to note here, and I can tell you 2 or 3 things based on this slide. First, Herb was actually correct that technically it is possible maybe to slip a house or something in on the eastern side of that stream. But the fact is, it's not practical and it's not feasible from a cost standpoint once you start factoring in the stream crossing and the permitting. So what you really have is it's a site that is challenged by this blue line stream, not just north-south, but also part of it that goes east-west. And if you know anything about this, it limits this site. And this is one of the reasons that this site has been lying out there for so long undeveloped. And it's because of these challenges like this stream. Also, Herb mentioned that there won't be any road stubs. Actually, there will be no road stubs over to a previously existing subdivision, but very likely there could be a road stub to the undeveloped tract to the north. Go to the next slide, please. The land use is standard up for this part of Eastchester. Office front, multifamily to the rear. It is sort of a consistent pattern of development. All of the Eastchester corridor overlay protections would be there. And we've pretty much gotten to the end of the undeveloped part of Eastchester. There are a few small tracts, but I think this is the largest of the undeveloped tracts that are out there. Next slide, please. I don't need to go into the land use plan in great detail. I just thought I'd throw this to you to point out that this really is consistent with the adopted land use plan. Next slide. I think it's important here to do two things. One, I want to address Mr. Jusak's question, and I want to make the point here that this change has been coming for a long time. When Foxwood Meadows was developed, all of this land was trees, and every single person who has purchased land either in the subdivision to the east or in Foxwood Meadows to the south has purchased their tract, purchased their home, knowing that they were in an office corridor with land to the north that was undeveloped. Now, we addressed this in our letter to the neighbors. So, we know that many of you and your children have used this land to play on, and you like having trees in your backyard and not houses, but everybody should be on notice that this land is not going to lie there undeveloped forever. Now, as to Mr. Jusak's comment, there is nothing in planning theory that says compatible means identical or similar. That's actually a misconception. Office use is compatible with residential, single family as well as multifamily. You can go into all of the fast-growing cities in North Carolina, Charlotte, Raleigh, etc., Wilmington, and all of the places that people are rushing to live in now are true mixed-use places where you have high-density residential next to low density, next to retail, next to office, and that is much more of a common theme and trend that you would see. So multifamily, just because it doesn't look like single family, does not mean it's incompatible. Go to the next slide, please. This is an illustration of the natural buffer that will exist to the east. It's a little bit off kilter because when I was doing a screen snap, it has to be a perfect rectangle. The truth is, it will be a little bit narrower at the top and considerably broader at the bottom to capture where the stream is on this site. But that's the width of the buffer that would be between the homes to the east and this site. Next slide. I know some of you might be asking the same question that we got asked in both of our neighborhood meetings is, but what about the wildlife? And they're concerned about the deer and the rabbits and the possums and all of that. I'm asked this question all the time. I have been asked this question for a time that is now measured in decades. And the only thing you can say in a situation like this is your subdivision was developed and you bought a house in that subdivision and you displaced wildlife too. This is not really a land use issue. It's a human interest issue. It's a common question, and this is the very first time I thought it would be interesting to put it out there because this is what we're asked. We live in a city, wildlife gets displaced, but everybody wants to know about it when you meet with them as neighbors. Next slide. Stormwater. Foxwood Meadows has had flooding. Everybody knows that. And that is why stormwater is something I do want to address, but stormwater is not a land use issue. Stormwater is an engineering technical issue. Those are two separate things. For stormwater, all you have to do is to meet city and state standards. These are engineering standards. These are not these objective standards that we apply in rezoning. It is important to note that pre-development, post-development, you're going to get the same amount of rain falling on the site. That doesn't change, but because you add impervious surface, yes, you will have less water being absorbed in the ground. And you will have a little bit of an increase in the velocity of the runoff if it hits a rooftop or asphalt. That is why, as in this case, Jamestown Engineering comes in, they do their hydrological studies, they look at topography, they do all sorts of very sophisticated things that I can't even begin to probably understand. And they build a stormwater detention pond that captures the water and holds it and slows it down so that the amount of water that is coming out of it is equal to the same amount of water that otherwise would be leaving the site pre-development. Next slide. A little bit about transportation. Everybody's concerned about the number of cars on Eastchester. In a recent matter before you, I talked about traffic studies and how sophisticated they are. This is a look at the traffic light that's just north of this site for everybody in High Point, not the people who live right here, but for everybody in High Point. That intersection is probably the best marker for what the traffic, how the traffic would change on Eastchester Drive. And at the peak traffic in the AM, it would increase 0.7 seconds, less than 1 second. And in the PM, there would be by the computer modeling, a 1.1 second delay. So that's, it's really something that nobody is going to be able to recognize and feel on Eastchester. Next slide. This table says the same thing. It's a macro view. If you don't know what a measured level of service is, that is nothing but a way of capturing the delay of time that you sit at an intersection as opposed to straight flow of traffic. The lines to look at here, let's look at the AM peak hour first. The lines to look at are the second and third line, where you're comparing 2027 build versus no build. And if you look all the way across, you will see that it makes no difference as to the level of service. It is build, no build, same level of service. And the same thing in the PM peak hour. If you go all the way across, the level of service does not change whether it's there or not. Go to the next slide, please. As to a micro view, there are a few driveways coming into Eastchester where it's already level of surface F. That's part of the problem of having a driveway that comes directly out onto Eastchester Drive. But we have, if we want to have a strong and vibrant economy and a place where people want to live and work, we're going to have traffic. The people, though, who would be moving to this site, whether in the office portion or the residential portion, if that's how it develops, will be moving there knowing that they're moving onto a heavily traveled corridor. Next slide. And this is the final one. I think it's important to note, pardon my poor drawing skills here, but there would be a second access point. It would be beneficial to folks who are at Wyatt Early to have a second point out. It would be helpful to have two different points of access for whoever and whatever is developed. That's our presentation. We're glad to answer any questions that you might have.
Very well. Any questions for the applicant this evening? Anything else? Thank you, gentlemen. The commissioners have any comments or questions about this? I mean, I've just mentioned, we can certainly bring this up again when we reconvene on Thursday. Looks to me like the applicant has offered buffer conditions on the southern border that are above and beyond what the city actually requires. Mr. Uzak's point, and I see it, but as Mr. Terrell pointed out, compatible doesn't mean identical. This would still be under the zoning that's being requested, still residential, which is what you have, resident and office. So that won't really change. Anyway, those are my thoughts. Anybody have anything additional? Yes, chair recognizes Mr. Uzak.
I was just going to say that on the map on page 11, which has land use designations, it notes that the area all around this site is low density residential, which
Well,
seems to me to be.
yes, but I think the issue here and the reason they're requesting a higher density is the city figures this on the gross acreage rather than the net. So by the time this is built, because of the areas of the site that can't be developed because of the topography and the streams, you end up with roughly the same sort of density you have in the surrounding neighborhoods. Mr. Shannon, would I be correct in that?
Could you repeat that question, please?
Although the applicant is asking for higher density zoning because so much of this property won't be able to be developed. We have the streams and some topography issues, and the city figures density on the gross acreage, not the net. So once this property is developed, the actual density over the gross is not necessarily any different from the surrounding neighborhoods.
I can't answer that question. I don't know the exact density of the surrounding area, but it is low density. I would just note that the land use plan does classify this area as office. Based upon the zoning designation they're requesting, office institutional, it would permit densities, if approved, up to 16 units per acre. I can't answer as to the intensity that they're proposing. What staff looks at is based upon adopted policies, would this district meet those policy guidance documents? And our recommendation is for approval that adopted policy guidance documents, the land use plan, districts that could go in that office land use designation, those higher densities, be it whatever residential use, would be meeting the policy guidance for this portion of the city.
Okay. Mr. Uzak.
On page 2 of the package, which isn't a map, it's talking about the zoning history, and it says that in 2005 a request was submitted to rezone this site and in the abutting parcel to the north to allow a combination of multifamily and office uses. The Planning and Zoning Commission recommended against it, and the City Council denied that request. I don't expect you to have this off the top of your head, Mr. Shannon, but does anything about that you could tell us that why they denied it back then?
I would note at that time, staff also recommended approval. That was include the land to the north. I would have to do more research as to the specific council's issues, but based upon the policies at that time, staff had also recommended approval of this request. Mr. Burnett?
And I'll add too that there was some concern, if I recall correctly, with the number of units, the number of trips, and the access point on Eastchester that was it was sending more units or more trips, I would say, out on Eastchester than the council was comfortable with at that point in time. I couldn't say how this particular request compares to that prior one. This property's had, and I think Herb just gave you a thumbnail sketch of the history of this property. This property's had a history in terms of zoning. It was originally zoned an office category under a prior ordinance. It was later rezoned for Natutsi in a PUD district or Plan Unit Development District for them to have their corporate headquarters and a distribution facility there. They decided to move their headquarters downtown instead, so that facility was never built on this location. Then in 1998, the owners rezoned it to back to an office district in order to market that property. Then in 1999 or 2000, the Ranneman Lake rules went into effect, and that's when the stream classification buffer rules went into place. And so that basically impacted significantly the back portion of this property for development. And that's why it's been sitting and being looked at differently over the period of years because of the stream buffer, as previously mentioned, the impact of the streams, the fact of its slope off of the frontage of Eastchester, so it doesn't have the visibility as the front portion of Eastchester does. So it's had some impacts over the years, and that's why you've seen a number of zoning cases through the years. This is probably the one that's come forward probably since 05, I think, probably to the commission. So there hasn't been anything recently in that respect. But to go back to that 05 case, I know a number of them, prior cases dealt with or concerned with the access onto Eastchester, particularly at that one access point there in alignment with City Lake Park overlook, and then, Ocala Lake Park overlook, as well as the number of trips that were going out on Eastchester at that point in time.
Thank you.
One additional comment that just came to mind as Mr. Burnett was speaking. Traffic was a key issue. At that time, go to blow up map, the area across the street where you see CZGB, that was the Drexel Heritage Showroom and Office Facility. There were several comments about that being an office, and since the driveways were offset, traffic conflicts with the office users letting out at the same time. One change since 2005 is that property has been rezoned. It says CZGB, but the only commercial use is an internal self-storage facility. And because of that, the Drexel Heritage is no longer there, and that conflict across the street as far as office building traffic coming out is no longer in place.
Very good. Anything else?
I have one question about.
Yes. The chair recognizes Commissioner Swift.
So there's going to be another entrance, and I'm assuming the office or whatever space is going to be in the front where there's track A and track B. Is that correct?
It would be toward the northern property line of the site. Like I said in my presentation, that one entrance, two allowed. One is that existing entrance that you see to the south that provides the access to the Wyatt Early facility. And then there will be another access along the northern property line of the site.
So it looks like the one on the northern part would line up to maybe Lake Point. Is that the street across? Will there be a stoplight, you think, at either one? Is that attractive?
I would let transportation answer the question about stoplights.
Okay.
The applicant did a TIA and did not recommend a stoplight at that location. That's something that we'll monitor in the future.
So not at either one?
Not at either one.
So there won't be any?
ma'am.
Okay.
And that driveway, we'll try to get it as close as we can to Lake Point, but that driveway at Lake Point is right on the property line. So the northernmost property driveway will be a little bit south of that. So, but that's something that we'll decide when they submit a site plan through TRC.
Anything else?
Mr. Kerman?
Yes. Chair recognizes Commissioner Venable.
Mr. Shannon, the plans to build a fence and the evergreens, will that be a condition of the zoning? Will it be
That is
requirement?
That is a condition. Let me just refer you to the page in your package. On page 16, that is page 2 of the conditional zoning ordinance. And under C, landscaping, screening, and buffer, under C1, it talks about any disturbance within 45 feet of the southern boundary of the property that higher landscaping standards for the double row of evergreen trees.
Okay, thank you.
Very well. Any further discussion on this evening? If not, we will table this until we reconvene on Thursday, and I assume the city staff will provide us with any further comments that may come in from the public in the subsequent 24 hours. We'll entertain a motion and vote on this issue on Thursday. And we will then move to the second item on tonight's agenda, zoning map amendment 21-02. Shannon.
Yes, Herb Shannon, Senior Planner with the City of High Point Planning and Development Department. Your next agenda item, zoning map amendment 21-02. This is a request from True Homes to rezone a 39.5 acre tract of land located northwest of Deep River Road between Gordon Road, and I-74. If you're familiar with this portion of the city, it's at the western terminus of the Quail Run Farm subdivision. This is a larger scale map of that area. The area that's highlighted in the teal color is the zoning site. Directly to the north and northeast is the existing Quail Run subdivision where you see Quail Run Drive, and access would be from existing stub streets back to Gordon Road. The applicant is requesting rezoning from the current R3 residential single family 3 district to a conditional zoning residential single family 5 district. This site is impacted by multiple physical constraints. This is a topography map of the area. Once again, for those members of the public who are not used to reading these maps, where those lines are further apart, it means the land is either fairly level or moderately sloping. Where the lines are closer together is a steeper topography. There are several streams that run through this site. As that teal dashed line, that kind of notes the boundary of the property. Along the southern boundary of the site, there is a perennial stream that runs in an east to west direction. Those areas you see gray kind of next to the stream, that is the floodway, 100 and 500 year flood zone areas that lie along both sides of that stream corridor. There's also a perennial stream along the western boundary of the site that runs in north-south direction. That's a combination intermittent and perennial stream that goes up into the zoning site. And there's also a 50-foot wide City of High Point transmission easement. Where you see that note site, that's the approximate location of that transmission line. It runs from left to right through the middle of the site. Because of these various constraints on the property, the applicant is requesting rezoning to a conditional zoning R5 district to allow some flexibility in the way they can lay out the site. They have included with this application is a conditional zoning ordinance where the applicant has offered a condition to limit the site to 80 dwelling units. As far as potential traffic impacts, this proposal for 80 dwelling units does not trigger a traffic impact analysis. The Transportation Department did look at that fact. Access would be from those existing stub streets along the northern boundary of the site, starting from the top left, Derby Circle, that is a stub street. And then there's Duke Hollow Court, which is a stub street. And to the right, William Joseph Lane, which is a stub street. If you had not had a chance to go out and visit the site, that land area along William Joseph Lane is currently under development now for single family developments. Key points to note from the staff analysis. First, compatibility. The budding residential development to the north and northeast at Quail Run Farm subdivision. Those abutting developments take their access from Quail Run Drive back to Gordon Street. It developed under the standards of the previous zoning orders, which allow development up to 3 units per acre. To ensure intensity is compatible with the surrounding area, the applicant has offered that condition, limiting the site to 80 dwelling units. That equates to about 2 units per acre. As far as environmental constraints, those applicants got to meet all requirements of the development ordinance. This site is within the City Lake General Watershed area, and as such, they're going to have to meet those environmental standards of the development ordinance. Where the streams impact the site, whether you have a classified stream, whether it's a perennial stream or intermittent stream, Depending on the intensity of development, stream buffers are required that range between a width of 50 to 100 feet along both sides of the stream. Finally, promoting a preferred development pattern, both the existing R3 district and the proposed CZ R5 district are primarily support residential uses, single-family dwellings. The primary difference is the density. To ensure that there would be a compatible development intensity, that condition for 80 units will offer similar development densities. That area to the north and northeast that's already developed, that's approximately 39.5 acres. Approximately 39.8 acres and contain about 98 lots. That's a density of 2.4 units per acre. As conditioned with this 39.5 acres or 80 lots, that's about 2 units per acre. So the condition offered by the applicant will assure a similar development pattern in regards to density of any development of the site. In conclusion, staff recommends approval of the request to rezone this 39.5 acre tract of land to the conditional zoning residential single-family 5 district. The request is consistent with adopted policy guidance because the requested CZR5 zoning is supported by the low-density residential land use classification of the land use plan. And the request is reasonable and in the public interest because the requested CZR5 district, along with the physical constraints of the site, will produce a residential development with a density similar to the surrounding area. That is a brief summary of this zoning map amendment. Are there any questions of staff at this time?
Questions for Mr. Shannon?
Let's see if anybody else had a question first.
Chair will recognize Mr. Uszak.
I've got 2 questions, Mr. Shannon.
Yes, sir.
The first is on the map that's on the screen right now. How are they going to get their major construction equipment into the site?
That would have to come from Gordon Road through Quail Run Drive to the site. That is the only means of access to this development. And as I noted, that area along Wilson Joseph Lane that's currently in development now, that's how they're bringing their equipment in.
Okay. And I didn't see anything from any residents that talked about that.
I would note I have had several calls from residents. I only had 2 questions similar to that. And I noted the same thing, that there's only one way in and out of that development. There is no alternate access point at this time.
My other question is on page 66 of the package, which I guess is something that the developer provided.
Yes, that is an illustrative plan that the developer provided, and that was part of their citizens information meeting report to the applicant. I would note there's no guarantee that the site's going to develop in that manner, but that is information that the applicant provided when they did their notice, their citizens information meeting to adjacent property owners.
Okay. What I note is that along William Joseph Lane, on both sides of it, are properties that are not actually under consideration here because they already own that and have it zoned properly, and they're building on those already when I was out there. But when you look at this picture here, you realize that those lots and the other lots that are shown here are significantly different in size than the lots that they've penciled in for their 80 other units. And I realize some of that reflects the fact that they've got a different, they're looking for a different zoning to make up for the property that they can't use. But it looks to me like these houses would be an awful lot different than the ones that are already there, although just based on lot size.
I would note they're both single-family detached dwellings.
Say that again?
They're both either what's already there now and what's developed off of William Joseph Lane. And if this zoning request is approved, they're both single-family detached dwellings. Yes, the R3 district does require a larger lot size. R3 district, the minimum lot size is 12,000 square feet. The R5 district, minimum lot size is 7,000 square feet. But they're both would be single-family detached dwellings.
Okay. That's really going to be the developer's problem too.
And that is the minimum lot size. And I would just note that plan is illustrative. It may develop that way, but it could be different. They could vary their sizes, but they cannot, that minimum lot size would be 7,000 square feet.
Thank you.
Yes, the chair recognizes Mr. Venable.
Mr. Shannon, the three roads that are stubbed in, would there be any requirements? Would all of those or any of those, become access points to those? Are there any minimum number of access points to that property?
That is going to be a issue that's going to be taken up by our technical review committee when, if approved and it go through the plan review. But I think the staff's ultimate goal is that all three of those be connected.
Okay.
Anything else for Mr. Shannon? Thank you, sir. Is the applicant with us this evening?
This is Judy Stalder.
Yes.
Judy Stalder, 3735 Admiral Drive in High Point. And also here to answer your questions is the developer, Jeff Gurnier from True Homes. You can gather from Mr. Shannon's presentation that this is a challenging site with steep topography and large areas of environmentally sensitive wetlands and waterways. And to protect those areas, we're asking for the R5 zoning to allow some flexibility on the lot size. I think we could go in and carve it up into larger lots, but then you would have neighbors, homeowners taking care of buffers, which typically they just cut down. They clear that area rather than leaving it natural. And we have found in the past that it is much better to have the smaller lots and have a homeowners association take care of environmentally sensitive areas than to add that into the lot size. And so that's the reason we're asking for this R5 zoning, is just to allow flexibility on the lot size. Because there is a condition of the zoning that puts a cap on the density, this rezoning actually decreases the number of houses that could possibly be built back there by putting a cap on the density. And just because the lots are smaller does not mean that the homes will be smaller or of a lesser value. Actually, the homes we plan to build will be comparable to those in the Quail Run subdivision. We had a Zoom meeting with the neighbors and or set up a Zoom meeting for the neighbors. One neighbor attended, and since then I've answered questions for two more neighbors. The neighbors understand the situation, the ones I've talked to, that there really is only one way in and out of this property, and you really can't stop development because of construction equipment. That's just part of the process, but the developer is under city regulations to keep the streets coming in and out clean. And of course, we'll only run those trucks when we have to. They don't just ride up and down for no reason. The site plan that was included in the packet was reviewed by the technical review committee. They did recommend connection to these three streets that were coming in. And they also recommended connecting those streets within the new part of the development to make sure that there was some circulation within. And so that plan that you see is a revised plan that shows that connection within as the technical review committee recommended. This rezoning is a practical and efficient way to use this property. It's in harmony with the existing neighborhood, and we ask for your favorable recommendation. And thank you for letting me speak tonight.
Yes, thank you. Any of the commissioners have any questions or comments for the applicant? Any discussion among the commissioners on this particular request? Public does have an additional 24 hours to submit further comments and questions, and we can certainly consider those if we receive any on Thursday evening. So we'll table that for now, and we'll reconvene and consider a motion and a vote on this particular request on Thursday evening. The next item on tonight's agenda is Eastchester Drive I-74 Land Use Assessment. Galante.
Wait for the presentation to come up.
Would it be feasible for us to go ahead and hear both of these land use assessments? I know we'll vote on them separately on Thursday, but if you'd like to present both of them, one right after the other, and then if we have any discussion, we can delve into that. Okay.
That's kind of how I plan to
Okay.
do it. Okay. All right, looks like we're up and running. Chair and Commission members, I am Heidi Galante, Planning Administrator with the City of High Point Planning and Development Department. This is a presentation of the Eastchester Drive and I-74 Land Use Assessment. It is focused on the impacts of the new interchange on the surrounding land uses. The presentation will be similar to the presentation that was given to you at your September 2020 meeting. Since that meeting, staff has prepared a public review draft of the assessment and posted it on the city's website. We held a public meeting on November 17th, 2020 to get feedback, at which approximately 20 people attended. It was a Zoom meeting. And we prepared and posted the public hearing draft that you have before you today for consideration and recommendation to the City Council. The first question you may ask is, what is a land use assessment? A land use assessment represents a look at a small area based on a specific need due to a change in the immediate environment. It is a policy document that is concentrated on a finite area to assess a specific issue and provide guidance for future development. In this case, the issue is the impact of the new interchange on adjacent land uses. The policy recommendations of this assessment will be used in conjunction with other existing city policy documents to provide guidance on future development proposals when they are presented to the city for consideration. This assessment covers a 140-acre study area along an approximate 1 mile section of Eastchester Drive from Festival Park to Lassiter Drive. There are 4 main objectives. They are to protect the city's water supply, maintain the safe and efficient transportation functionality of the corridor, protect adjacent neighborhoods from incompatible development, and protect the gateway corridor entrance into the city. The policy recommendations of this assessment will be used in conjunction with the policy recommendations of the Land Use Plan and the Eastchester Corridor Plan. In the case of a conflict between the assessment and these two planning policies, the assessment, once adopted by City Council, will govern because it is the most recent study and it is more focused than the Eastchester Corridor Plan or the Land Use Plan. Main factors considered in doing the assessment were watershed restrictions, new road alignments, existing land use, and property ownership. General conclusions for the assessment are that it is a very narrow corridor. There is limited area for new development. Lot consolidation will be needed for new development to occur. We need to continue to limit access points to Eastchester to maintain the efficient transportation functionality. And there were needed street name changes that you actually approved at your January 28 meeting. There are minor amendments to the land use plan that are recommended, and the office institutional district, which currently exists along the corridor, offers a wide variety of uses. Due to the expansion of the interchange, some adjacent roads had to be realigned and some roads were renamed, as I just mentioned. I just wanted to show this briefly to show those realignments and name changes that you've already approved. Now on to the land use recommendations. Staff took an in-depth look at 7 areas along the corridor, but ultimately concluded that only 2 areas should be amended on the land use plan. The map that you have on your screen shows 7 areas with a red bubble outline, and the colors show where there is common ownership of 2 or more properties. The white areas within the study area denote single ownership properties. Since I have reviewed these areas in detail at a previous meeting, I will not go through them again in detail, but I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have at the end of the presentation. This shows the current land use plan and the 2 recommended amendments. Area 2 along the lake is recommended for amendment from low-density residential to recreation open space to reflect the desire to protect the drinking water supply. Area 5 between I-74 and Gordon Court is recommended for an expansion of the office land use designation to include a 2.4 acre area to the east as shown on the map. These land use plan changes are recommendations only. Land use plan amendments require a separate process that must be reviewed and approved after a public hearing by the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council. After the assessment is adopted by City Council, staff will bring the amendments forward for consideration. Staff is currently working on a timeline to bring those forward, but there are no specific dates at this time. So a summary of the recommendations are the street name changes are complete. We need to continue to limit direct access to Eastchester to maintain its efficiency. There are 2 recommended land use plan amendments that I just mentioned. And this concludes the presentation on the Eastchester and I-74 assessment, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Well, any of the commissioners have any questions for Ms. Galante on this particular land use assessment? I recognizes Mr. Moore.
Good evening. Thanks for the presentation. I'm curious of the impact of the recreation open space to that particular area, given I know there's some other things that are probably still in limbo. They're on the docket we voted on a few weeks ago, but I think City Council is still voting on that. Does this land use plan, I guess, if it was to supersede those things, would it have impacted that? And should we deny that request, but should it go through, is this still in play? Because I believe it would have impacted part of the property that you have outlined here.
Actually, the request is out on Eastchester, so it would not even abut this area. This is where there's a single family home or 2 single family homes right on the edge of the lake.
Okay.
And what we're recommending that is if those houses should ever come up for sale, that the city should consider purchasing those properties for additional protection to the lake.
Okay.
Very good. Anything else? If not, we will table this item until Thursday evening and consider any additional comments we may receive from the public before we entertain a motion and a vote. So now we will move to the final item on tonight's public hearing agenda, which is the Jamestown Bypass Land Use Assessment.
Again, Heidi Galante from the Planning and Development Department. This is a presentation of the Jamestown Bypass Land Use Assessment. This presentation will also be similar to the presentation that was given to you at your September meeting. And since the time of that meeting, we have prepared a public review draft of the assessment and posted it on the city's website. We held a public meeting on January 12th of 21 to get feedback. Approximately 45 people attended. It was also a Zoom meeting. And staff has also prepared and posted a public hearing draft that you have before you today for your consideration and recommendation to City Council. Oops, sorry, I didn't move the slides. There we go. As with the Eastchester and I-74 assessment, the purpose is to evaluate the impacts of roadway changes on adjacent land uses and provide policy guidance for potential future development opportunities. The assessment covers a 1.4 square mile study area, including an approximate 2 mile section of the Jamestown bypass from I-74 to the Jamestown town limits, and the 5 Points commercial area between I-74 and Montlou Avenue. There are 4 main objectives. They are to evaluate the impacts of the new roadway, examine existing land uses, assess water and sewer availability, and provide policy guidance for potential future development. The policy recommendations of this assessment will be used in conjunction with the policy recommendations of the Land Use Plan, the US 311 Bypass Study, and the Core City Plan. In the case of a conflict between the assessment and these planning documents, the assessment, once adopted by City Council, will govern because it is the most recent study and it is more focused than the other plans. Oops, sorry. We're ahead of ourselves here. There we go. The main factors considered in drafting the assessment were new road alignments, existing land uses, property ownership, water and sewer availability, and watershed restrictions. It doesn't like me, sorry. General conclusions are that this will be a new front door into the city when the bypass opens in 2022. There are opportunities for development at new roadway intersections, on undeveloped parcels, for underutilized properties, and within the opportunity zone west of I-74, which offers tax incentives to those that make investments in the area. There is also a potential change in character along the existing Greensboro Road due to changes in traffic patterns. There are street name changes that need to be considered, and amendments to the land use plan are needed. Due to the construction of the bypass and other changes in road alignments around this project, some road names will be impacted. The Jamestown bypass, which connects I-73 to I-74, has already been named Jamestown Parkway for the open segment between Guilford College Road and Vickery Chapel Road within the Jamestown town limits. Therefore, it makes sense to continue with that name from Vickery Chapel to I-74. Greensboro Road east of I-74, shown as segment B on your map, is an 0.8 of a mile section between the bypass and the Penny Road Wren Farm Drive intersection. The name Greensboro Road currently ends at Penny Road, where it becomes West Main Street in Jamestown. Therefore, it no longer connects High Point to Greensboro via a street name. So it should be further evaluated to see if a new name should be considered. The dead-end segment of Greensboro Road, shown as segment A on the map, will not connect to the bypass on the western end, and it will intersect with Hampton Road on the eastern end. It should be evaluated to determine a new name. Greensboro Road west of I-74 is about 1/3 of a mile that becomes East Lexington Avenue at 5 Points Place. Because this section is short and it is bisected by the interstate, renaming this section to East Lexington Avenue should be considered. Ring Street is divided by the bypass and it will no longer be connected. This provides an opportunity to rename one of the segments of Ring Street. It should be further evaluated to determine which segment may warrant renaming. These changes are suggestions only. Official road name changes are a separate process that must be reviewed and approved after a public hearing by the Planning and Zoning Commission. Now for the land use recommendations. Staff took an in-depth look at the study area and identified potential opportunities for changes and made recommendations on future land use. The map shows the recommendation areas with a red bubble outline, and the color coding on individual properties throughout the study area shows where there is common ownership of 2 or more properties. The white properties within the study area denote single ownership. The majority of the study area is currently within the City of High Point city limits, except for areas 7 and 8, which are within High Point's planning area boundary and on the High Point side of the annexation agreement line with the town of Jamestown. Since I have reviewed these areas in detail with you at your previous meeting, I will not go through them in detail, but I'll be happy to answer questions concerning them at the end of the presentation. I will, however, mention one area that has been modified from the original draft of the assessment, and that is Area 8. Area 8 is located on the southeast corner of the bypass and Dillon Road. This slide shows Area 8 as it was originally proposed. It was approximately 82 acres, and about 2/3 of the area was within the Oakdale Reservoir Critical Tier 3, which limits development to 2 dwelling units per acre and 35% built upon area. Due to these constraints, the area was modified, and it is shown on the next map. Area 8 was reduced to approximately 44 acres and 18 parcels. It is now solely within the Oakdale Reservoir General Watershed, which allows 70% built-upon area. There is a perennial stream in the area that runs north-south to the east of Dillon Road that will have an impact on future development. The area contains some undeveloped parcels and some single-family residential uses on large lots. It is located outside the city limits, and if it is developed, public water and sewer will need to be extended, and therefore it will need to be annexed into the city. This area could support a mix of residential uses, especially along Dillon Road near the bypass. It is recommended for a land use plan amendment to change from low-density residential to medium-density residential. Due to the watershed restrictions and the impacts of the stream, land assembly will be needed to achieve higher densities. It is currently under Guilford County zoning residential single-family 40, which limits development to 1 dwelling unit per acre. A change in zoning should be initiated by a developer, and conditional zoning will likely be needed to ensure that the land use policies are met and the adjacent neighborhoods are protected. This map shows all of the areas for which an amendment to the land use plan is recommended. Areas of like change have been combined, and the map shows total acreage of the change from one land use classification to the other. I'll generally describe the changes starting from the left and moving to the right. West of I-74 are approximately 19 acres recommended to change from local convenience commercial to mixed-use development. East of I-74, there are approximately 45 acres recommended to change from community regional commercial to local convenience commercial. Area 3B near Spencer Street has approximately 10 acres recommended to change from low-density residential to medium-density residential. The remainder of Area 4, which is north of the bypass along Ring Street, has approximately 8 acres recommended to change from low-density residential to local convenience commercial. Area 5 on the south side of the bypass east of Enterprise Drive has approximately 17 acres recommended to change from community regional commercial to mixed-use development. And the area along the southern portion of Ring Street has approximately 20 acres recommended to change from low-density residential to mixed-use development. Area 6A between Scientific Street and the railroad tracks has approximately 38 acres recommended to change from light industrial to medium-density residential. Area 6B east of the railroad tracks has approximately 26 acres recommended to change from light industrial to low-density residential. Areas 7 and 8 along Dillon Road and Bales Chapel Road have approximately 80 acres recommended to change from low-density residential to medium-density residential. I'll note that this area has also been changed and reduced from 132 acres to reflect the area that was removed from the original Area 8. Zoning changes. This map shows the areas that are recommended for a zoning change. Area 6A. The zoning in this area is a mix of residential single-family 5, heavy industrial, and light industrial. This area was annexed into the city in the 1960s and has been zoned as it currently is since 1992. Due to the recent development of Wren Farm and the proximity to other residential neighborhoods, this area may be best suited for residential. It is recommended that the city initiate a zoning change to residential for this area to protect it for future residential development. The R5 zoning district is recommended to serve as a holding zone for this area until a residential development proposal seeking a higher density is submitted. Area 6B. Like Area 6A, it is recommended that the city initiate a rezoning for this area due to its constraints and adjacency to existing residential uses to the south and east. This area has been zoned light industrial since 1959, and only 1 3/4 acre parcel was developed with a small office building in 1986. The R3 zoning district is recommended for this area, which is consistent with the zoning to the east and to the south. A summary of the recommendations. There are street name changes that need to be considered. There is a plan initiation that I didn't really cover in the report that is recommended for creation at the 5 Points mixed use area. There are 9 land use plan amendments that are recommended, and there are zoning changes for 2 areas that are also recommended. The implementation of these recommendations will require separate processes that must be reviewed and approved after a separate public hearing before the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council. As I said before, after the assessment is adopted by City Council, staff will bring these forward for consideration, and we're currently working on a timeline to bring those to you, but there are no specific dates at this time. That concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions? None? Thank you.
Great, thank you.
We'll table this request and consider it again when we reconvene on Thursday evening. Do we need a formal motion and vote in order to recess these public hearing items? I don't believe we had done that previously, have we?
No, you don't need to, when you recess the meeting tonight, everything will.
Everything will move over. Okay. In that case, we'll move on to the director's report.
Just have a couple things to call your attention to. You have your director's report in front of you, list of projects that are ongoing there. At your dais tonight, there was a copy of the draft department work program for the next fiscal year, beginning July 1. You'll have that officially in your packet next month, and I'll review it with you with any projects that are new as well as those that are continuing on. And then in addition to that, on the agenda, we'll have 2 zoning cases, one of which will be another one of the comprehensive zoning map amendment requests. Any questions on any of that information or anything in general?
Anything?
Thanks.
Very well. If there's nothing else from the commissioners or city staff, I will move that we recess tonight's meeting and reconvene Thursday at 6 o'clock in these chambers. Have a second.
Second.
Commissioner Wallace has seconded that motion. I'll ask the recording secretary to take a roll call vote.
Commissioners, please say yes or no when I call your name. Mr. Usack,
Yes.
Mr. Kirkman,
Yes.
Ms. McGill,
Yes.
Mr. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Morgan,
Yes.
Ms. Swift,
Yes.
Mr. Venable,
Yes.
Mr. Walsh,
Yes.
and Mr. Wheatley.
Yes.
The commission has passed that motion 9-0.
9-0. We are in recess until Thursday evening.
Great job. That's a good presentation.